Chapter 1. New Year, New Plans. Mary Grant had always loved the quiet hum of a new year. It wasn't the fireworks or the champagne that thrilled her. It was the sense of possibility, the blank calendar waiting to be filled with plans, promises, and maybe a few surprises. This year, though, felt different. She was engaged, officially. A sparkling ring sat snugly on her finger, catching the glow of the string lights Tom had draped across his apartment for their New Year's Eve celebration. Tom Baker, her fiancé of exactly 6 months, was sprawled on the couch beside her, one arm draped lazily across the backrest, the other holding a glass of sparkling cider. He wasn't a champagne guy. Too many security conferences had taught him to distrust anything that fizzed without a clear label. Mary teased him about it constantly. "You know," she said, swirling her own glass, "most people toast the new year with actual champagne." Tom smirked. "Most people also reuse passwords like 123456. Doesn't make it smart." Mary laughed, leaning her head against his shoulder. "You're impossible." "And yet," he said, tipping his glass toward hers, "you agreed to marry me." She clinked her glass against his. "Temporary lapse in judgment." "Permanent lapse," he corrected, grinning. "No takebacks." The clock on the wall ticked toward midnight, and Mary felt that familiar flutter in her chest, the one that came every time she looked at him and realized this was her person. They weren't rushing to the altar, and she liked that. They had plans, practical ones, like moving in together before they even thought about venues and guest lists. It wasn't romantic in the traditional sense, but Mary had always believed romance lived in the details. The shared grocery lists, the late-night Netflix debates, the quiet comfort of knowing someone had your back. "So," Tom said, setting his glass down, "what's your resolution?" Mary tilted her head. "Resolution? Yeah, new year, new you. What's the big plan?" She pretended to think. Maybe, stop dating guys in IT security." Tom chuckled. "Too late for that." "Fine," she said, grinning. "Then, learn to cook something that doesn't involve a microwave." "That's ambitious," he teased. "Should I start drafting a disaster recovery plan?" Mary elbowed him lightly. "What about you?" Tom's expression softened. "Honestly, just keep building what we've got. Make sure we're ready for the next step." Mary felt her heart squeeze. "You mean moving in?" "Yeah." He shifted slightly, turning to face her. "End of our leases, we start looking. No pressure, no rush. Just us." She nodded, warmth blooming in her chest. "I like that." "Good," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Because I've already started a spreadsheet." Mary groaned. "Of course you have." "Hey," Tom said, mock-offended. "Spreadsheets are romantic. They're about planning a future together." "Nothing says love like conditional formatting," she quipped. He laughed, and for a moment, everything felt easy, like the world outside didn't exist. Just them, two people who had figured out how to balance careers, late-night takeout, and the occasional argument about whose turn it was to do laundry. They weren't perfect, but they were solid. And Mary liked solid. Solid felt safe. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8, and Mary closed her eyes, letting the sound wash over her. When the clock struck midnight, Tom kissed her, slow and certain, like a promise. "Happy New Year," he murmured against her lips. "Happy New Year," she whispered back, and for the first time in a long time, she believed it. Chapter 2. Back to work. The first Monday of the new year hit Mary like a cold splash of reality. Gone were the cozy evenings with Tom, the lazy mornings spent debating whether pancakes counted as a balanced breakfast. Now it was back to fluorescent lights, endless emails, and the hum of office chatter that somehow managed to sound both urgent and meaningless at the same time. Mary tugged her scarf tighter as she stepped into the lobby of Grant and Associates, her marketing firm. The place smelled faintly of coffee and ambition, two things she had in abundance, though one more than the other. She swiped her badge, rode the elevator up to the 7th floor, and braced herself for the inevitable flood of Happy New Year greetings. Sure enough, the moment she walked in, her coworker Lisa popped up from behind her monitor like a meerkat. "Mary, Happy New Year." Did Tom finally set a date? Mary laughed, unwinding her scarf. "Hi, Lisa. And no, not yet. We're taking our time." Lisa grinned. "Taking your time? You've been engaged for 6 months. That's like 3 years in wedding planning time." Mary rolled her eyes good-naturedly. "We're moving in together first. End of our leases." "Ooh, trial run," Lisa teased. "Smart. Make sure he doesn't leave socks everywhere." Mary smirked. "If socks are the worst of it, I'll consider myself lucky." She settled at her desk, powering up her computer, when her manager, Claire, appeared with a bright smile and a man in tow. "Mary, meet Jason. He's joining the team." Mary looked up, and immediately understood why Claire's smile seemed extra sparkly. Jason was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of easy grin that belonged in toothpaste commercials. His dark hair was neatly styled, his suit perfectly tailored, and his handshake firm without being aggressive. In short, he was the kind of guy who made HR brochures look aspirational. "Nice to meet you," Mary said, standing to shake his hand. Likewise, Jason replied, voice smooth, warm. Claire's told me you're the one to go to for all things campaign strategy. Mary smiled politely. Flattery will get you everywhere. Jason chuckled, and Mary noticed the way his eyes lingered. Not in a creepy way, but in that subtle, assessing manner some men had. She brushed it off. She was engaged, happily so, and Jason was just a new coworker. Nothing more. Claire clapped her hands. Great. Jason, your desk is right over there. Mary, if you could help him get settled later. Of course, Mary said, already turning back to her monitor. She had a mountain of emails to climb before lunch. By mid-afternoon, Jason had made himself at home, chatting with Lisa, cracking jokes with the interns, and somehow managing to charm the notoriously grumpy IT guy. Mary couldn't help but notice his knack for sliding into conversations like he'd always belonged there. It wasn't overt, just smooth, effortless. When 5 o'clock rolled around, Lisa popped her head over the cubicle wall. Drinks tonight? Everyone's going. Mary hesitated. She usually headed straight home to Tom, but it was the first week back, and she didn't want to be the antisocial one. Sure, she said, just for a bit. The bar was loud, buzzing with post-holiday energy. Mary sipped her gin and tonic, laughing at Lisa's story about her disastrous ski trip, when Jason slid onto the stool beside her. Not too close, not too far. Just close enough that she could smell his cologne, something crisp and expensive. Survived your first day back? He asked, smiling. Barely, Mary said, grinning. I think my inbox is plotting against me. Jason chuckled. Mine too. But hey, at least we've got good company. Mary nodded, scanning the group. Everyone seemed relaxed, happy. It felt good to unwind after weeks of deadlines and holiday chaos. She didn't think twice when Jason offered to grab her another drink. It was friendly, normal. Later that night, as she curled up on her couch with Tom on video call, he was working late at his office. She mentioned the outing casually. Went for drinks with the team, she said, smiling at his tired face on the screen. It was fun. Good, Tom said, voice warm but distracted as he typed something. Glad you had a good time. And that was that. No drama, no tension. Just two people living their lives. If only it stayed that simple. Chapter 3. Drinks after work. By the second week of January, Mary had fallen back into the rhythm of work. Early mornings, endless meetings, and the occasional existential crisis over campaign metrics. The only thing breaking up the monotony was the team's newfound tradition. After-work drinks every Thursday. It started as a casual, let's celebrate surviving the first week back, and somehow became a standing appointment. Tom didn't mind at first. He even joked about it. Go socialize. Just don't let them rope you into karaoke. I've heard your rendition of Livin' on a Prayer. Mary laughed, promised to spare Bon Jovi the insult, and headed out the door. The first night was harmless. The second, too. By the third, Mary noticed Jason had a habit, a subtle one, but he always ended up next to her. Not in a creepy, chair-dragging way, just conveniently close. If they were at a booth, he'd slide in beside her. If they were at the bar, he'd claim the stool next to hers. It felt coincidental, at least that's what she told herself. Another gin and tonic? Jason asked one evening, flashing that easy grin. Mary smiled politely. Sure, thanks. He returned with her drink and one for himself, settling in like they were old friends. So, he said, leaning just enough to be heard over the music, how's wedding planning going? Mary laughed. Non-existent. We're moving in together first. Smart, Jason said, nodding. Test drive before you buy. Mary raised an eyebrow. It's not buying, it's committing. Jason shrugged, sipping his drink. Same principle. She let it slide. He was just making conversation. Probably. By the fourth outing, Mary posted a photo on Instagram. A group shot of the team, all smiles and raised glasses. Tom liked the photo within minutes, adding a heart emoji. Sweet. Normal. Except later that night, when she curled up beside him on the couch, he scrolled through her feed again, frowning slightly. Looks like you're having fun, he said. Tone casual but eyes sharp. We are, Mary said, smiling. It's nice to unwind. Tom nodded slowly, then turned the phone toward her. You notice anything? Mary glanced at the photo. What? Jason, Tom said evenly. He's next to you. Again. Mary blinked. So? It's a group photo. Tom's gaze didn't waver. Check the others. She did. And, okay, yeah. Jason was beside her in every single one. Not pressed against her, not inappropriate, just there. Always there. Mary laughed a little too quickly. That's a coincidence. Tom didn't smile. Maybe. Or maybe he's positioning himself. Tom, she said, rolling her eyes. Come on. He's just a coworker. I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong, Tom replied, voice calm, steady. I'm saying I don't trust him. Mary felt a flicker of irritation. You think I'd let some guy? I think, Tom interrupted gently, that I've been your partner for nearly 4 years. In all that time, name one instance where I've done something to hurt us. Mary opened her mouth, then closed it. He was right. Tom leaned back, expression unreadable. You've asked for my trust and I've given it. But you haven't given me yours. Mary stared at him, startled. What are you talking about? I told you my feelings about something that affects us, he said quietly. Instead of hearing me, you decided I was your opponent. That's not fair, she protested. Tom shrugged. Feelings don't care about fair. You told me my concern is insecurity. Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm just an insecure guy who doesn't like the idea of his fiancé spending time with another man. But I told you I trust you, so you're carrying my trust alone. If you break it, it's on you. His tone wasn't angry. It was worse, calm, resolute, like a man who had made a decision and wouldn't revisit it. Mary swallowed hard. Tom. He stood, kissed her forehead gently. I'm not going to fight you. I'm not going to guilt you. I'm going to operate normally, until I have a reason not to. And just like that, the conversation was over. No slammed doors, no raised voices. Just a quiet shift in the air that Mary couldn't quite name. Later that night, lying in bed, Mary stared at the ceiling. She loved Tom, completely, but his words echoed in her head. You're carrying my trust alone. Felt heavy, priceless, and suddenly, she wasn't sure if she'd been as careful with it as she should have been. Chapter 4. Patterns and Warnings. The weekend passed quietly, but not comfortably. Mary and Tom went through the motions, grocery shopping, laundry, a movie night that should have felt cozy but didn't. There was no fight, no icy silence, just space. A subtle shift, like someone had moved the furniture an inch to the left and now nothing lined up quite right. Tom wasn't sulking. He wasn't passive-aggressive. If anything, he was maddeningly normal. He asked about her day, laughed at her jokes, kissed her goodnight. But Mary could feel the difference. He had pulled something back. Not his love, but his openness. And that scared her more than anger ever could. By Monday, she was desperate for normalcy. Work was a welcome distraction. Even if Jason's presence made her hyper-aware of every interaction. She told herself Tom was overreacting, that Jason was harmless. But then Jason appeared at her desk mid-morning, leaning casually against the partition like he owned the place. Morning, he said, flashing that easy grin. Coffee run. You want anything? Mary hesitated. Sure. Latte? Coming right up, Jason said. And for a split second, Mary wondered if she should have said no. It wasn't a big deal. Coworkers grabbed coffee for each other all the time. Still, Tom's words echoed in her head. He's positioning himself. When Jason returned, latte in hand, he lingered just long enough to ask about her weekend. Mary kept her answers short, polite. She wasn't going to feed whatever narrative he was building in his head. That night, Tom was already home when Mary walked in. He was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, chopping vegetables like a man on a mission. The smell of garlic and olive oil filled the air. A peace offering, maybe? Or just dinner? Mary couldn't tell anymore. Smells amazing, she said, setting her bag down. Thanks, Tom replied, glancing up with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. How was work? Busy, Mary said, slipping off her heels. Jason's settling in. Tom's knife paused mid-chop. Jason, Mary swallowed. Yeah, the new guy. Tom resumed chopping, voice calm. He seems friendly. Mary forced a laugh. He's fine. Just a coworker. Tom didn't look up. You know what I do for a living, right? Mary frowned. IT security? Exactly, Tom said, sliding onions into the pan. My job is spotting patterns, things that look harmless until they're not. Mary crossed her arms. Tom, I'm not accusing you of anything, he said, tone even. I'm telling you what I see. A guy who makes sure he's next to you in every photo. A guy who offers coffee, who asks about your weekend. It's subtle. Intent usually is. Mary felt heat rise in her cheeks. You think I can't handle a coworker? I think, Tom said quietly, that you're underestimating how much effort some people put into looking harmless. She stared at him, words tangled in her throat. He wasn't angry. He wasn't jealous. He was concerned. And that made it harder to dismiss. Tom turned off the stove, wiped his hands, and faced her fully. His eyes were steady, calm, but there was steel beneath. I trust you, Mary, completely. But trust isn't a set and forget thing. It's something you protect, something you guard. Mary's chest tightened. You think I'm not guarding it? I think, Tom said, voice soft but firm. You're treating it like it's indestructible. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with things neither of them knew how to say. Finally, Tom kissed her temple, gentle as ever. Dinner's ready. Mary nodded, throat thick. She sat at the table, staring at the plate in front of her, appetite gone. For the first time, she wondered if she'd been wrong. Not about Jason, but about what trust really meant. Later that night, as Tom slept beside her, Mary scrolled through her phone. Photo after photo from their team outings. Jason always there, always close. She told herself it was coincidence. But deep down, a tiny voice whispered, what if it's not? And for the first time, Mary didn't have an easy answer. Chapter 5. The Shift. By mid-January, Mary had perfected the art of pretending everything was fine. She smiled at Tom over breakfast, laughed at his dry jokes, and kissed him goodbye like nothing had changed. But something had. She could feel it in the quiet moments, the way his eyes lingered a fraction longer, the way his voice carried a weight she couldn't quite name. He wasn't cold. He wasn't distant. He was watchful. And that unsettled her more than any argument could. At work, Jason was as charming as ever. Too charming, maybe. Mary started noticing things she hadn't before. Not because Jason had changed, but because Tom's words had planted a seed she couldn't ignore. It was little comments, slipped in like sugar in coffee. "Wow," Jason said one afternoon, leaning against her desk as she typed. "You're really dedicated. Most people would be planning their honeymoon by now." Mary glanced up, forcing a smile. "We're taking our time." Jason shrugged, lips curving into that easy grin. "Careful with that. Sometimes waiting too long makes people rethink things." Mary's fingers froze on the keyboard. "Excuse me?" Jason held up his hands, all innocence. "Just saying. Life's short. People change." She stared at him, pulse ticking faster. It wasn't overt. It wasn't even rude. But it was pointed. And for the first time, she wondered if Tom had been right. That evening, Mary sat in her car outside her apartment, engine off, phone in hand. She scrolled through her messages. Tom's last text was simple. "Home. Want me to start dinner?" Normal. Sweet. Safe. And yet, she hesitated before replying. Because here was the truth. She didn't want to tell him about Jason's comment. Not because she was hiding anything, but because she didn't want to hear that quiet, steady voice saying, "I told you so." She didn't want to admit that maybe, just maybe, she'd been wrong. She typed back, "On my way. Pasta okay." Hit send. Started the car. Dinner was easy, light. Tom cracked jokes about a client who thought two-factor authentication meant sending 2 emails. Mary laughed, genuinely this time, and for a moment the tension melted. But later, as they curled up on the couch, Tom's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, and set it aside. "Work?" Mary asked. "Yeah," Tom said, rubbing his temple. "Security audit. Someone thought password 123 was a good idea." Mary chuckled, but her mind was elsewhere. On Jason's words, on the way he'd looked at her like he knew something she didn't. She hated that it lingered. She hated that it mattered. The next day, Jason struck again, subtle, calculated. "Big plans this weekend?" he asked casually as they walked out of a meeting. "Just relaxing," Mary said, keeping her tone neutral. Jason smiled. "You should come to that new wine bar downtown. Great place to get to know people." Mary stopped in her tracks. "Jason," she said, voice firm. "I'm engaged." He blinked, feigning surprise. "I know. Just thought you might want a break." Mary stared at him, something cold settling in her chest. This wasn't harmless. This wasn't coincidence. This was exactly what Tom had warned her about. And suddenly, she felt sick. Not because Jason had crossed a line, but because she dismissed Tom's concern like it was insecurity. Because she treated his trust like it was bulletproof when, in reality, it was fragile and precious and hers to protect. That night, Mary lay awake long after Tom had fallen asleep, staring at the ceiling. She thought about trust, about love, about the quiet strength in Tom's voice when he said, "You're carrying my trust alone." And for the first time, she understood what that meant. It wasn't about Jason. It wasn't about drinks after work. It was about partnership, the kind that didn't just share space but shared responsibility. And she had failed at that. But not for long. Chapter 6, Escalation. By Thursday, Mary had decided 2 things. 1. She was done pretending Jason's behavior was harmless. 2. She was going to handle this before it spiraled into something ugly. The day started innocently enough. Emails, meetings, the usual chaos. But Jason was everywhere. He popped by her desk twice before lunch, each time with that same casual charm that now felt like a performance. Mary kept her responses clipped, professional. No openings, no invitations. But Jason wasn't the type to take a hint. It happened after the weekly strategy meeting. The team filed out, chatting about campaign timelines, and Mary lingered to gather her notes. Jason waited too, of course he did. When the room emptied, he leaned against the conference table, arms crossed, smile easy. "So," he said, voice low, like they were sharing a secret. "What are you doing this weekend?" Mary didn't look up. "Spending time with my fiancé." Jason chuckled softly. "Right, Tom, isn't it?" She froze. He'd never said Tom's name before. It sounded deliberate, like a card he'd been saving. "Yes," she said, tone sharp. "Tom." Jason pushed off the table, closing the distance just enough to make her pulse tick faster. Not from attraction, but from anger. "You know," he said, voice smooth, "you deserve someone who really sees you." Mary's head snapped up. "Excuse me?" Jason shrugged, all faux innocence. "Just saying. You're smart, funny, gorgeous. And you spend your nights waiting for a guy who's buried in work." Mary stared at him, stunned. The audacity, the sheer arrogance. And then, like a lightning strike, Tom's words came back. He's positioning himself. He hadn't been paranoid. He'd been right. About everything. Mary stood, gathering her things with deliberate calm. Jason, she said, voice steady. I'm happily engaged. I intend to stay that way. So let me make this crystal clear. I will not be having drinks, lunch, dinner, or anything else with you. Ever. Jason blinked, clearly not expecting the steel in her tone. Mary, no, she cut in, eyes hard. This conversation is over. She walked out without looking back, heart pounding. Not from fear, but from clarity. For weeks, she treated Tom's concern like an inconvenience. She'd dismissed his trust like it was indestructible. And now, standing in the hallway with her pulse racing, she understood the truth. Trust wasn't a wall. It was glass. Strong, beautiful, but fragile if you didn't protect it. And she was done being careless. That night, Mary drove home with a plan forming in her head. Not just to tell Tom what happened, but to show him through actions, not words, that she valued what they had. That she understood what partnership really meant. Because love wasn't just sharing space. It was sharing responsibility. And she was ready to carry her part. Chapter 7. The lunch invitation. Friday started like any other. Emails, coffee, the usual scramble to meet deadlines. But Mary felt different. Stronger. Clearer. Yesterday's confrontation had burned away the fog of doubt, leaving only resolve. She wasn't going to let Jason or her own pride jeopardize what she had with Tom. By noon, the office buzzed with weekend chatter. Lisa was planning a spa day, Claire was heading to a wine tasting, and Jason was waiting by the elevator when Mary stepped out of the conference room. Hey, he said, flashing that same easy grin. Got a minute? Mary kept walking. Make it quick. Jason fell into step beside her, voice low. Thought we could grab lunch tomorrow. Just the two of us. No work talk. Get to know each other better. Mary stopped so abruptly that Jason nearly collided with her. She turned, eyes sharp, voice steady. No. Jason blinked, clearly not expecting bluntness. Come on, it's just lunch. No, Mary repeated louder this time. Not lunch. Not drinks. Not anything. I'm engaged, Jason. Happily. And I intend to stay that way. His smile faltered, replaced by something harder. You don't have to be so defensive. Mary's laugh was short, humorless. Defensive? No, I'm being clear. You've been circling for weeks, and I've ignored it because I thought you were harmless. That was my mistake. So let me spell it out. I'm not interested. I will never be interested. And if you respect me, or this job, you'll drop it. Jason's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He just nodded once, curt, and stepped back. Got it. Mary didn't wait for more. She walked away, pulse steady, head high. For the first time in weeks, she felt like herself again. Not the woman second-guessing her fiancé's instincts, but the one who knew exactly what she wanted and wasn't afraid to protect it. At her desk, Mary exhaled slowly, fingers trembling just a little as she opened her laptop. She wanted to text Tom, to tell him everything, but words felt inadequate. This wasn't about saying you were right. It was about showing him through actions that she understood what trust meant, that she valued it enough to fight for it, and she would, starting tonight. That evening, Mary left work early, swinging by the store for Tom's favorite bourbon and the ingredients for his favorite dinner. When she walked into their apartment, Tom looked up from his laptop, surprise flickering across his face. You're home early, he said, smiling. Mary set the bag on the counter, heart thudding. Yeah, she said softly. I missed you. Tom's smile widened, slow and warm, and for the first time in days, the space between them felt like it was closing. Chapter 8. Drawing the line, Mary didn't waste time. The moment she walked through the door, she set her plan in motion. Bourbon on the counter, pasta boiling on the stove, candles flickering like tiny promises. It wasn't about grand gestures, it was about intention. About showing Tom that she understood what he'd been trying to tell her all along. Tom wandered in from the living room, sleeves rolled up, laptop abandoned. His brows lifted at the sight of the table set, the bottle of bourbon gleaming like a peace treaty. What's all this? He asked, voice warm but cautious. Mary smiled, nerves fluttering in her chest. Dinner. And a conversation. Tom studied her for a beat, then nodded slowly. Okay. They ate first because Mary needed the buffer, the rhythm of normalcy before diving into the hard part. Tom complimented the pasta, teased her about finally learning to cook something that didn't involve a microwave. She laughed, but her mind was already on the words she needed to say. When the plates were cleared and the bourbon poured, Mary took a breath. Tom, she began, voice steady. I need to tell you something. His gaze sharpened, but he didn't speak. He just waited. Jason asked me to lunch, she said, the words landing heavy in the quiet. Just the two of us. And before that, he made comments about us, about you. I shut it down. Completely. But I should have seen it sooner. Tom's jaw tightened, but his voice was calm. And now, Mary reached across the table, fingers brushing his. Now I see what you meant. About trust. About guarding it. I treated your concern like it was insecurity, and that was selfish. You weren't trying to control me. You were trying to protect what we have. And I didn't listen. Tom's eyes softened, though his expression stayed serious. Mary, I love you, she said, words tumbling out like truth finally breaking free. Completely. And I'm sorry I made you feel like your feelings didn't matter. They do. You do. More than anything. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, thick, charged, full of things unsaid. Then Tom squeezed her hand, slow and deliberate. Thank you, he said quietly, for telling me, for seeing it. Mary blinked back the sting in her eyes. I don't want space between us. Not ever. Tom's smile was small but real, the kind that reached his eyes this time. Then let's close it. He stood, pulling her into his arms, and Mary melted against him, relief washing through her like sunlight after a storm. This wasn't about winning an argument. It was about choosing each other, again and again, even when it was hard. And as Tom kissed her, slow and certain, Mary knew one thing for sure. Trust wasn't just something you carried. It was something you fought for. And she was ready to fight. Chapter 9. Rebuilding. Saturday morning arrived with sunlight streaming through the blinds and the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. Mary stretched, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Last night's conversation had been hard, but necessary. And now, the air between her and Tom felt different, clearer, stronger. She padded into the kitchen to find Tom at the counter, pouring coffee like a man who had mastered the art of domestic bliss. He glanced up, smile tugging at his lips. Morning. Morning, Mary said, stealing a kiss before grabbing a mug. You're up early. Couldn't sleep, Tom admitted. Kept thinking about floor plans. Mary blinked. Floor plans? For when we move in together, he said, sliding a tablet across the counter. A spreadsheet glowed on the screen, color-coded and terrifyingly detailed. I've got columns for square footage, commute time, and proximity to decent pizza. Mary laughed, nearly spilling her coffee. You're ridiculous. Ridiculously prepared, Tom corrected, grinning. Look, I even added a natural light rating. Mary shook her head, smiling despite herself. You know, most people just browse listings. Most people also reuse passwords, Tom said, deadpan. Doesn't make it smart. Mary snorted. Fair point. She leaned against the counter, scrolling through his spreadsheet. It was absurdly thorough and oddly endearing. This was Tom in a nutshell. Practical, meticulous, always thinking 3 steps ahead. And for the first time, Mary realized how much she loved that about him. Not because it made life easier, but because it meant he cared enough to plan for their future. So, she said, sipping her coffee, what's our budget? Tom's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. Glad you asked. They spent the next hour debating neighborhoods, commute times, and whether a balcony was a necessity or a luxury. Mary argued for a balcony. Plants need sunlight, while Tom countered with data on heating costs. It was playful, easy, the kind of back and forth that reminded Mary why they worked so well together. They weren't just in love, they were a team. At one point, Tom looked up from his tablet, expression soft. You know, he said quietly, I wasn't sure we'd get here. Mary's chest tightened. Tom. He reached for her hand, fingers warm against hers. Last week, I felt like I was losing you. Not because of Jason, he's irrelevant, but because I thought maybe we didn't see partnership the same way. Mary squeezed his hand, eyes bright. We do. I just needed to learn what it really means. Tom smiled, slow and certain. Guess we both did. Mary grinned. So, partnership means arguing about balconies? And spreadsheets, Tom said solemnly. Lots of spreadsheets. She laughed, leaning in to kiss him, and for a moment, everything else faded. The tension, the doubts, the noise. It was just them, 2 people building something solid, something worth protecting. Later, as they curled up on the couch with takeout and a movie, Mary felt a quiet certainty settle in her bones. Love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect timing. It was about showing up, every day in big ways and small, and choosing each other, even when it was hard. And as Tom draped an arm around her shoulders, murmuring something about open-concept kitchens, Mary smiled, knowing one thing for sure. They were ready for whatever came next. Chapter 10. Moving forward. Apartment hunting sounded romantic in theory. 2 people strolling through sunlit spaces, imagining their future together. In reality, it was a circus. By the 3rd Saturday in a row, Mary and Tom had seen everything from shoebox studios masquerading as urban chic to sprawling lofts with rent that could fund a small nation. This one has character, Mary said, stepping into a narrow hallway that smelled faintly of old paint and regret. Tom peered at the cracked tiles. Character is realtor code for run. Mary laughed, tugging him toward the living room or what passed for one. A single window overlooked a brick wall, and the radiator hissed like an angry cat. Natural light, Tom deadpanned, snapping a photo for his spreadsheet. 0 stars. Mary grinned. But think of the ambience. Ambience of a dungeon, Tom muttered, earning a playful elbow to the ribs. The next place was better. Open layout, hardwood floors, even a balcony. Mary lit up the moment she stepped inside. Tom. Balcony. Tom eyed the price tag and winced. Mary, this costs more than my car. Your car is 10 years old, she shot back. This has space for plants. Tom sighed, pulling out his tablet. Fine. I'll add a plant happiness index. Mary laughed so hard she nearly dropped her phone. You're ridiculous. Ridiculously committed, Tom corrected, grinning. To you, and apparently to your future ficus. By late afternoon, they collapsed into a booth at a diner, sharing fries and exhaustion. Mary rested her chin on her hand, watching Tom scroll through his spreadsheet like a man decoding the universe. You know, she said softly, I love this. Tom looked up, brow furrowed. Love what? The overpriced apartments? The radiator that sounded like a demon? Mary smiled. No, this planning, arguing about balconies, eating fries after a day of chaos. Feels right? Tom's expression softened, and for a moment, the noise of the diner faded. Me too, he said quietly. Even when it's hard, especially then. Mary reached across the table, threading her fingers through his. We're good at this. Tom squeezed her hand, eyes steady. We're better than good. On the drive home, Mary thought about everything, the tension, the doubts, the lessons learned. Love wasn't perfect. It wasn't effortless. It was work, compromise, and choosing each other every single day. And as Tom hummed along to the radio, tapping the steering wheel in rhythm, Mary felt a surge of certainty so strong it made her smile. They weren't just planning a move. They were building a life. Together. Later that night, sprawled on the couch with takeout and a movie, Tom nudged her gently. So, he said, voice teasing, when we find the perfect place, do I get to pick the Wi-Fi name? Mary grinned. Depends. What's your first choice? Tom smirked. Trust issues. Mary burst out laughing, nearly choking on her noodles. You're terrible. Terribly clever, he said, kissing her temple. And terribly in love with you. Mary's heart flipped, and she kissed him back, slow and certain. Because that was the truth, the kind that didn't need spreadsheets or floor plans. Just two people choosing each other again and again. And as the credits rolled and Tom pulled her closer, Mary knew one thing for sure. Whatever came next, balconies, budgets, or bad radiators, they'd face it together. Epilogue. A place to begin. 3 months later, Mary stood in the middle of their new apartment, barefoot on polished hardwood floors, sunlight streaming through the balcony doors. The balcony, her balcony, overflowed with potted plants, each one thriving like a tiny green victory. Tom's desk sat neatly in the corner, his laptop open, a mug of coffee beside it. Their life, woven together in furniture and laughter, felt solid, real. Tom appeared from the kitchen holding 2 mugs. Coffee delivery, he said, grinning. Mary took hers, smiling. You're spoiling me. Strategic spoiling, Tom corrected, settling beside her on the couch. Keeps morale high. Mary laughed, curling into his side. Morale is excellent. They sipped in companionable silence, the hum of the city drifting through the open balcony door. It wasn't perfect. There were boxes still unpacked, a leaky faucet waiting for a plumber, but it was theirs, and that mattered more than anything. Tom set his mug down, turning to face her. So, he said casually, about that wedding. Mary's brows lifted. What about it? Tom's smile was slow, deliberate. I think it's time we pick a date. Mary's heart flipped, and for a moment, she just stared at him. The man who had taught her that trust wasn't a given, but a choice. A choice she'd make every day for the rest of her life. She grinned, leaning in to kiss him. Let's do it. Tom kissed her back, warm and certain, and Mary felt the future unfurl like sunlight across the floor. Bright, steady, and theirs to build.